Let's call this meeting to order, please. November 28th, the regular council meeting. We acknowledge that the Northern Rockies Administration Center is located in the heart of the traditional territory of the Dene Cree and Dunizah people of the Fort Nelson and Prophet River Nation. We further recognize the rights provided by our treaty. We also celebrate the contributions and enduring presence of the Métis in our region. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually, is being streamed and recorded. Are there any additions to the agenda? I have none. Council? Staff?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Adoption of the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Gerwing, second by Councillor Andrews. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. There are 5 sets of minutes there. The special regional council minute October 24th, public hearing from October 24th, regional council from October 24th, 2022, special regional council meeting October 28th, and the inaugural meeting of November 7th. We move adoption of those, please. Moved by Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Souls. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor of adoption? Opposed? That's carried. Those are adopted. Is there any business arising from those minutes? I have a couple, if nobody else has any. The regular meeting of October the 24th. I wasn't at that meeting, so I got a couple of things. Page 14 of 113, new business item number 9. We were writing a letter to the Minister of Forests with respect to the lack of involvement from the northern part of the province on that committee. Did we write that letter?
I do not believe that letter has been complete yet, but I confirm it is. Okay, it is.
Okay, could I get a copy of it, please?
We'll make sure. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. The second item that I have is on the next page, resolution 228, that we send a letter to the Ministry of Health based on an issue that happened in the community to a particular person, and it was quite a long list of things. Did we put a letter together to the Ministry of Health for that?
Not the Ministry of Health. We went to the 2 different agencies. There was communication to BCEHS and to Northern Health. And we had intended to do an update for council tonight and couldn't pull the report together in time for tonight. So we have a report coming back to council on the December 12th meeting specific to that discussion that occurred at that meeting regarding the resident.
So next meeting.
For the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And the last one is over the next page, 16, talks about staff developing and executing a work plan to assist in extending Dr. Ferrier's work permit. Am I saying that name right? Ferrier? The work permit.
And that's part of that same report that'll come back. We'll have 2 topics on that report, the incident at BCHS and then the work permit piece for the doctor. So December 12th, sir.
Perfect. That's all I had. Thank you. Is there any public comments? No? Okay. Okay.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm actually sitting in the parking lot because the doors are locked.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Andrews is here to let you in.
Oh, I wonder why they're going. Oops. Okay, well.
I should just wait till she comes in because maybe she has a question too. So. No, we locked you out so you couldn't ask a question.
No, I'm good with questions right now, so don't
Okay.
wait. Thank you.
Okay, so all right, so you have no questions then. Okay. Then let's move to reports, bylaws, and policies. So administration report number 83, the update on the BCUC decision about common rates and revenue.
The work in progress.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to bring council up to date to on the decision that BC Utilities Commission recently handed down on the application by Fortis for postage stamp rates matching ours with the rates for the rest of the province. And the bundled in with that was also an application for an increase in delivery rates for 2022, which were granted in interim and made permanent as part of this decision. So this goes back, pardon me. This goes back almost a year and a half to a point at which the annual submission for revenue requirements by Fortis was made to the Utilities Commission for approval. Bundled in with that, they included what had been suggested to them or directed by the BCUC, a follow-up on an application for common rates, which had previously been rejected by the Utilities Commission. The idea of common rates and the push for common rates has to do with the fact that Fortis, being the dominant provider of gas to the rest of the province, currently serves Fort Nelson as a separate operating entity with a rate structure different from that the rest of the province. The move was to subsume our service area, Fort Nelson service area, into the larger rate regime. The decision, the outcome was largely in favor of that application. We had some small wins along the way, but generally speaking, it went in favor of Fortis. We proceeded to file as an intervener in the fall of last year, subsequent to becoming aware that Fortis is making this application in June of 2021. We had a presentation from Fortis. Thereafter, a subsequent meeting that evening, council resolved to oppose Fortis's application and put particular emphasis in the discussion on protecting residential ratepayers. The full process began in January. It was a very structured process, very legalistic, very lockstep, an exchange back and forth of documents in series. And the links in the admin report provide the whole layout of what happened. I think all in all, there were some 130 exchanges when all the exchanges are tallied up, including email and calls. It was very much a complex process because, as said, there were two processes combined into one. And the nature of the discussion became very technical. We called on the assistance of Michael Manhus from Norton Fulbright for legal assistance. And eventually we called in Dr. Chris Corbett, who works with Northern Rockies in maintaining our Edison database, and who is an expert in statistical interpretation and so on, which is the direction that a lot of the discussion took. The process also led us to combine efforts with the Fort Nelson Chamber for sake of efficiency, and because the capacity required to execute this properly really wasn't ours alone, nor was it the intent to provide a one-sided residents-only view of the application. So that collaboration was quite fruitful, worked well, and it ensured that the community was represented with a single voice rather than providing any opportunity for divide and conquer on our arguments. The application for delivery rates was decided, as said, early on through an interim process. The changes amounted to 3.41% increase in delivery rates for 2022, dated from January 1st. While we did make some objection jointly to some of the elements of that application, the application was really supported well by fact, and our objections were used largely to raise issues that would be important further into the common rates discussion. Net impact on users over a 10-year period projected to be about 15 cents, so that it didn't merit a lot of effort and capacity being spent on it. The common rates issue was much more complex and time consuming. So the rate structure that exists now, that won't exist as a result of the discussion, is one that's quite different from that of the province. Our ratepayers, our residential ratepayers, pay less in terms of proportion and absolute dollars than do ratepayers elsewhere in the province. And similarly, our small and large commercial gas consumers pay more than elsewhere. So the application for common rates would have and will have the result of shifting the burden of cost from commercial users to residential users. Because that's the case, that was the focus of a lot of our opposition and case building. The common rate that is being talked about is essentially tied to the fact that Fortis is a cost plus business, meaning that they submit operating costs for approval on an annual basis to the BC Utilities Commission, which approves those as base costs, and they get a top up accordingly for providing service under a regulated fee schedule. When the common rates are applied, as they were applied for, when they come to be applied, that burden will be shifted. The essence of the argument, and it's easy to get lost in the detail. and I'll try not to be confusing. The essence of the argument leads to the fact that, or focused on the fact that there would be a shifting of burden in the amount of roughly present day dollars of $157 more for the average gas user in Fort Nelson, residential gas user in Fort Nelson
Annually?
annually. In order to mitigate that, because that was obviously a point of resistance and argument, Fortis proposed that the change be phased in. And they further proposed that revenue that had been captured from local ratepayers, residential and other, that was surplus to their needs for 2021 would also be put into a pot and spread over the phase-in period to take the edge off it. Net result is that while the impact is $157, once it's fully phased in, the impact is $157, but as it's phased in, it will look like a differential of $5 annually compounded. So $5 and then $5 on top of that, and $5 on top of that over a 5-year period. The problem in doing that, or the fact that is masked in doing that, is that the impact even on a year-to-year basis is greater, because that surplus revenue that has already been collected has not been returned to ratepayers, but essentially they've prepaid. They've paid down that incremental increase. So it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, but it takes the edge off it on an annual basis. On the other hand, one of the wins is that shifting to common rates brings down small and large commercial rates. That will be implemented without a phase-in period. So that will be immediate.
Do we know what kind of potential savings the NRRM will see? Would we be a commercial small business with savings in this new
Yes.
rate pay?
A number I don't have, but yes, yeah, we would be a consumer on that level.
Councilor Going.
Okay, so help me to understand this. So over the next 5 years, the proposed increase is going to essentially only be $5 for the next 5 years. So then what happens in year 6? Do we all of a sudden start paying $157 more annually?
The $5 increases,
That's only,
because they're compounded, when they get to the top, will put us on a par with the rest of the province. Because the increases are actually not $5, the increases are $5 plus what has been prepaid as a surplus.
well, okay, but help me to understand the day of reckoning. There has
Okay.
to be a day of reckoning. You can only do smoke and mirrors for so long,
Year 6.
right? So year 6.
Year 6, the rates will be the same as BCUC rates, so they will have climbed by $157 for the average residential user.
Right, but okay.
Year over year. So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you'll see the first year, $5 increase to your home bill. Second year, it'll be a $10 increase. Third year, it'll be 15, then 20, then 25 over 5 years. But then at year 6, we'll be paying $157 on average, more than we're paying now, which will put us in the same place as the other residential users in the province.
That's right. And
That's what you said. Yeah.
The way the statistics were argued and the way they were displayed in support of the application, Mayor and Councillor, again, is somewhat misrepresentative. It's not clear to see through because those are comparative figures. Those are the additional cost of moving toward common rates on top of any increase in rates. So
Okay.
2022 saw a rate increase of 3.41 for residential users. It will be whatever based on a forecast for next year, plus that $5. Similarly, those reductions to commercial users will be in the context of whatever the rates are set at as they go ahead. So those could be gobbled up by a big rate increase for commercial users, but we'll be in the same boat as the rest of BC. So in arguing for this, one of the things that held water for Fortis was the idea that they wanted to protect local ratepayers against volatility of rates. And that's explained, or their explanation ties the cost of delivering service to the volume of gas consumed, the number of users in the community. So they take up a good volume, takes up a good portion of the cost. And it leaves some of the detail sort of in a fog off to the side and makes it difficult to see what's happening. But the argument was they were going to protect us from volatility. Our counter argument to that had been, well, of course you can protect our rates from going up and down if you set them high enough and lock them in, then they're never going to have to go up. In support of that, as I say, they did forecasts and projections of economic growth, demand, population, and general consumption, which on their curve continued in a downward fashion indefinitely. So they took what we argued was an opportunistic historic snapshot and used that as the basis for projection. And that was a big part of an extended argument back and forth between our statistician and them. And in the end, despite information from BC Stats that showed our population curve had turned the corner and was now projected to go up, notwithstanding the fact that there are economic indicators and potential developments that will turn the corner for the economy, all associated with gas demand. The projections, because they were an accepted model, were the ones that BCUC placed the heaviest emphasis on and accepted.
Transportation costs. Can you speak to the transportation costs? Because that was a
Transportation-
win.
Yeah, transportation cost is an argument where we held the line, had a small win. It's one component of the overall cost. And for historic reasons, and because we have a much different delivery mechanism and access to natural gas than most of the rest of the province, we will end up paying 5%, 0.05 of what the rest of the province pays in terms of transportation and storage. We don't have to store our gas, and transportation is a relatively simple, straightforward exercise. So that was a win. That is the only significant exception to common rates. So we'll have common rates with two riders. One rider is a phase-in. The second rider will be just that. We have reduced what they call a midstream rate.
Yeah.
So in terms of overall impact, I think if council refers to or draws from memory the figures, the saving to the average small commercial user will be about $350 a year relative to the status quo. And that's the phrase that's always got to move along in brackets with those numbers. And likewise, large commercial users, about $3,300 annually. In terms of the overall cost to the community, Fortis sold this as a wash. So it's not, it's neither an increase nor a decrease to the community relative to what it would be under the status quo, but rather it's a rebalancing of the burden of cost from commercial users to residential users, and it brings them in line with the rest of the province. Pardon me. And I won't belabor some of the points here. They're in the arguments back and forth up here. I think there might be some interest in terms of the decision as to possible routes to follow in the context of considering how the commission came to the decision. It's important to understand that they directed Fortis to come back for a second time, having made some adjustments to their previous application. So they told them to come back. Secondly, they did that with multiple references, and throughout the exchanges, there was a constant point of reference that this is what the province really wanted. The province wants unified utility rates across BC because they want one ratepayer to pay the same as the other ratepayer. Hence the postage stamp rate. If you buy a stamp in Fort Nelson, it takes your letter as far as if you buy it in Vancouver. So there was that pressure. The other pressure, and a good deal of the commission's decision revolved on this point as well, and that was the argument on I use it in quotation marks, fairness. The fairness argument that won the day there was that because Fortis is the dominant player across the province for the provision of this particular utility, the only fair thing to do is to have everybody pay the same and share equal cost. The truth actually
I recommend that we change our winter so that it's only 3 months long, like on Vancouver Island. Anyone second that?
Maybe the province can make that happen.
the figures that they presented are based on, I believe, the average consumer elsewhere in BC, residential consumer consumes 8 gigajoules per year, and we supposedly get by on 10. Although I'll reserve opinion.
I think my last bill was 10 all by itself. Yeah.
So there were a lot of discrepancies in the statistics we went back and forth with. I think we presented what I thought was the best argument that was available to us. Our advice going in was that we had a significantly weaker standing than we had in the previous case. And including a 5-year rider. Originally Fortis had suggested a 10-year rider, and at one point in the discussion, and you can see it in the documents if you read the whole chain of exchanges, they would have been good with a 20-year rider. That was not acceptable to the commission by reason of the fact that they didn't want to see, because surplus payments were being used to pay that down, they didn't want to see what they referred to as intergenerational unfairness. So current ratepayers paid that. If you extended it 20 years, they would never get the benefit back from what they paid.
Was the fairness considered to the residents who no longer live here that paid that surplus?
That was not part of the argument.
Interesting.
Fairness was very broadly interpreted. The operant definition of fairness was established by somebody who set out a set of rules. I'm looking at Bev, I think 1894 was the reference point for the rules for such things as this. So
Okay.
if there is a question as to further steps, what's available to us, this is one of those, the decision of the judges is final situations. The advice we have is that we would have recourse for appeal. Were we able to demonstrate a fault in the law, not simply in judgment? Or beyond that, because there is and I'm not suggesting inappropriate interference, but influence in the wind that multiple governments in succession had expressed, not strictly on our case, but in general, their wish that there be a unified set of schedule of rates as they apply to utilities, electrical, etc. Those under provincial control. Then that being the case, any follow-up would probably have to be political in nature and not legal. And again, that's the advice that we've received.
So if I can clarify the legal, and that's an appeal to the BCUC or an appeal through the
Yes.
courts? Through the BCUC or the courts?
That was the general statement that was made, and I think, Mayor, that the way I would interpret what we were told would be that any appeal would rely on demonstration of the fault of law.
Yeah, and that tends to be general administrative law in the province, right? Is that if you're going to appeal something that's not appealable, that you can go to the court and argue to the court that there's been an error of fact, error of law, or a failure of administrative justice, and the court will determine whether or not they agree with you. What we need to determine as to whether or not that approach, A, can be won, B, what the cost benefit of that would look like, right? With respect to the dollars that you might put into a case like that. I mean, there's always an argument for a principle-based argument to be made in front of the courts, but I don't know if that's something this council or this community would want us to proceed on. So I'm certainly open to any suggestions. I know that the report said that this was to be received for information, but I really think the amount of money that we put into this discussion is in order.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. First thing is that it's not that this restructuring is not a complete loss across the board, because from an economic development perspective, and you start looking at industry of any form that use gas, it's going to be a win. It's actually a win right off this bat. And so we are in an we are looking at ECDEV in whatever ways we can. So that's actually a benefit to us. It's not a benefit to the residences, obviously. So I don't see, like, I personally don't see the idea of chasing this being of a whole lot. I mean, chasing it through a court to be very cost effective, I don't think it would be. But one of the questions that I have is that, and those of you who were around when you were really young and so on, do you remember who owned the gas that was sold back in the 60s? Who sold the gas in Fort Nelson?
Fort Nelson Gas did.
Fort Nelson Gas.
My uncle
was
ran
bought-
it.
Hmm?
My uncle ran.
Yeah, and your uncle ran it. And it was bought by BC Gas. BC Gas eventually bought the rights for that. When Fort Nelson Gas was providing the gas for Fort Nelson, it was a private business that was selling gas. So I just think that so my question is that in light of the fact that we have a asset management program and we have a structure in the Northern Rockies that gives us the ownership and control and maintenance of roads, of the rural roads in our area, and we have an airport. We have all these different infrastructure things. We have things like gravel pits, quarries, where we supply our own gravel under permit. So could we own a gas line could we provide gas to our own community again and kick Fortis to the curb? I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm saying, is owning a gas line something that, or a gas network distribution system, something that a municipality could do? It seems to be able to do, we can do a lot of other things.
So you're talking about a utility, a municipal owned utility, which can happen, whether it's water, sewer, or even, unless there's specific rules in the BC Utilities Commission that prevent that from happening. But that's why it was there in the first place, right? It was there to provide gas because we had a gas plant just down the road that could provide gas.
If that's the issue, that we can't, for some reason, let's market ourselves as a customer. I'm sure someone else would look at us as a customer. And are we stuck with Fortis?
Yeah.
I'm less worried about being stuck with Fortis or someone else. It's more just an issue of whether or not it's a service that we could provide in our own. And I have no idea when Fortis mentioned that this is a wash to them, as far as it's not as though they're a cost plus business. They're not gaining a great deal by this restructuring. It's just a restructuring. We may not find that the numbers work to own a gas distribution system. So it's not as though I recommend that. I just said that that's for the people who are local, who think about the fact that we have local gas, local ground, a local processing facility. Could we have a local distribution tank from a legal perspective?
Councilor Roper?
I just think that's a fascinating concept. There's some municipalities that provide telecommunications to their communities. And then when you look at Prince Rupert, they're providing telecommunications beyond their own community. They've expanded that beyond, but the company is owned by the city. And it could be, this sort of thing could be run in a way that's similar to a nonprofit where, we're not making money, but we're saving money for the region. I just think that's such a fantastic idea, and I think it's worth looking into. Would there be any other communities or areas that have a similar setup where they're providing that utility as well? That's a question I would have.
Does staff have any comments with respect to those comments before I go to Councilor Dickey?
Not to answer a question, not aware of anything, to be honest with you. I mean, we'd have to look into it, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I know there are communities in Alberta that have their own gas wells that have, I think Medicine Hat is one of them. So it's not unheard of whether or not we can actually do it. We'd be going, if you think about it, we'd be going full circle, right?
Yeah.
From ownership to sale to BC Gas, to sale to Fortis, to sale or to start the process over again. But we'd have to ask the question. Councilor Dickey.
This is probably something that the partnerships, when we talk about building relationships and partnerships with Indigenous communities, West Bank First Nation is a real prime example of setting up your own utility, water and sewer. They don't just rely on the municipality of West Bank. So it's probably something that could be looked at in the future and start doing our groundwork. Lots of federal money in that.
Please, Mike.
As much information as we have, because we did explore that, and actually, I'll be cautious because it was discussed in a confidential meeting, joint meeting of the chamber and council. So I'll make general statements. Generally speaking, any utility under the control of BCUC requires BCUC's agreement to transfer ownership and operation for starters. And one ingredient of that is the agreement of the asset holder. So that's the
yeah.
general statement. Council can interpret.
So
that
the
into
current utility
particular.
would have to agree to turn it over to any potential new.
That's the information I understand.
Okay.
It's quite distinct from things that aren't under BCUC's
Yeah.
control, like
Yeah.
water and sewer.
Yeah. That's, I was wondering if that would be the case.
But it's still not far-fetched. And
It's
I say that because first of all, we have other large-scale service entities that, for example, CN and CN Rail is not really interested. They support the idea of someone doing a short line. Why? Because it's not really a high volume system line for them at this point, and so they support that. And we've got their letters of support that we've seen. But so it's possible that Fortis would be interested in that. But then the flip side of that is that we don't want to take something that costs our municipality a whole lot of money to operate. So it's
Once again, the cost benefit analysis. So I see two things here that we need to resolve and to determine whether or not we want staff to ask the question. Do we have the ability in the BCUC regulatory framework to own a utility ourselves? And the second thing is to determine whether or not we want to appeal this decision in any way.
I think their statistical information of 8 GJs in Vancouver is different than what it is here. So where did they get the number 10? Like how many people have looked at their Fortis BC bill and seen 10 every month? I just don't see how we could possibly be at 10 and Vancouver or another community being at 8. Our temperature is.
And that was annual.
Yeah.
That was an annual number.
Even though in their stats, the delivery fee is only $3.80 here and $10 in Vancouver, it still doesn't make sense that we would be so high.
Yeah.
I sent Scott the stats from Fortis BC on the price comparisons between Fort Nelson and down south. And it's $115 per month compared to $111. I've never seen a $111 bill here, have you?
Just to further that, my November statement shows I used 14.5 gigajoules in November, not annually, November.
Yeah, and that's in one billing cycle. So, Mike,
But those figures are intended, I believe, to be monthly.
monthly, not annually.
Not
Well, that's a little closer, I suppose.
I guess if you average it out over the 12 months of the year, maybe it could be close to 10 monthly. Yeah.
All right. Is there any appetite to ask staff to determine whether or not there's the ability to own your own utility in the BCUC regulatory framework?
This reminds me of an earlier discussion that council had regarding meeting of the whole or so on, the discussion, a fulsome discussion around an idea. I'm not prepared to make a recommendation that we pursue this at all. I just think that we as a council should pay attention to what's going on in the world around us and what we're connected to directly. And let's think about it. That's my recommendation.
I'm
Yeah,
just,
Councilor Grow.
sorry, Mayor. I'm just thinking about all of the work that needs to be done in terms of connectivity, in terms of health, in terms, like the list is long and expensive. And I'm just wondering, like Councillor Souls, if this is something that we want to ruminate on and perhaps bring it up at our strategic planning session and see where it falls into where we want to go within the next 4 years.
So then does that also include the idea of appeal? Because that appeal is much shorter term than potentially having your own utility. It appears pretty clear to me that an appeal to the BCUC is there is no appeal process. It's an appeal to the court. And then when you do the cost benefit analysis, I really wonder if they're telling us it's a wash, is there really a benefit from a dollar perspective to invest into appealing this at the legal level, because it would have to figure out which one, error of fact, error of law, or error of administrative fairness. So there's a dollar amount just to figure out whether or not you have a case, never mind actually proceed that case. I personally don't feel that appeal, is worth the dollars that we would spend on it. Councillor Dickey.
I think there's always, maybe it's not filing an appeal, but always doing the research of what other municipalities are doing. So are they just going to accept it, or are they going to ask the same questions we're asking? And also reaching out to the First Nations communities of, how do they feel about this? But I think, when West Bank did it, they did go through the BCUC process. So it was sanctioned by the BCUC, and they agreed to sell the assets because Fortis owns the pipes and the wires that go to the homes. So I think there's research that can be done, and maybe not this fiscal, but it's something to look at because we're always going to need the gas.
Yeah, so that goes hand in hand with the idea of picking it up to a strategic discussion. Mike, is your mic on for a reason? Oh, no,
Pardon me.
I was just wondering if you had something.
What I would like to take the opportunity, Mayor, to I guess terminate the discussion, for me anyway, is to remind a few points for context that the figures that are quoted in this report and the figures that were presented by Fortis in the application do not reflect actual change to any individual or the average user's bill per se. That secondly, that's heavily affected by the cost of the commodity. And there is significant variability in those $5 per year increments potentially, because as costs fluctuate with inflation, the buffer that's built up by that surplus that was that overpayment may be consumed more rapidly than anticipated. And that anticipated $5 increment is subject to review on an annual basis and adjustment. So it could be $5 in January. The differential could then go to 7 or 10, or it could fall if it looks like that number will extinguish over that period of time sooner or later.
I'm of two minds there. I do believe that the work that you guys did with respect to pointing out the fact that there was a surplus and it should be returned in some way, and therefore you got a phased in approach, I think was a win. The other side of that is the smoke and mirrors bit. It's already been paid for by us. So it is kind of smoke and mirrors by them, but at the same time, it's a phased in approach, which hopefully will give the ratepayers an opportunity to get used to and that's above the commodity price and all the potential increases that might come over the next 5 to 6 years. So are there any other discussion points before I move on? I just really want to thank staff and the chamber for all the work that they did, you know, in dealing with this complicated process of moving forward, and the funds expended. And, you know, hopefully there'll be a recovery of some of those. I believe there's a process that you can go through to try to do that, but hopefully we'll see a recovery of some of those, and we'll move this to the strategic plan with respect to what a long-term fix may look like. All right. Thank you very much, Mike. Oh, that moves us to the next simple discussion item, which is the Boreal Caribou recovery plan. So there are some options there. There's an expectation that we make some sort of a decision with respect to this, and I'll turn it over to staff to inform us on those options. Ms. Thompson.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. So before you, I've prepared a report regarding the Boreal Caribou Protection and Recovery Plan that was drafted by the province. Since approximately December of 2021, the province has provided information to Northern Rockies Regional Municipality and Mayor and Council regarding the draft Boreal Caribou Protection and Recovery Plan. Most recently on August the 8th, I'm going to refer to them as the province because there's 2 ministries involved and their names are way too long. Ministry of Forests and then the Ministry of Forests, Lands, Water and Resource Stewardship. Those are the 2 that I'll refer to as the province. They provided a presentation to Regional Council on August the 8th. Following that presentation, Mayor and Council resolved to ask staff to seek additional information from Stantec Consulting regarding options around looking at the socioeconomic impacts that plan may present, as well as Mayor and Council had some questions regarding the role of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality and the public in regards to plan implementation. So since then, we have reached out to Stantec Consulting to get additional information, and we've provided a letter to the province dated September the 15th, outlining the concerns that Northern Rockies has regarding certain aspects of the draft plan. The report has a bit of background as far as how we got to where we are today, and why the draft plan was necessary, as well as some of the engagement that the province undertook in regards to public engagement, as well as engagement with Mayor and Council. So the report provides a bit of an update of where we're at with the actual draft plan. So we have received confirmation from the province that the draft plan has been provided to the ministry executives for their consideration. It sounds like there's additional work and dialogue that needs to occur between the province and First Nations related to how this plan links to other strategic initiatives, so particularly around watershed management. The province wasn't able to provide any kind of timeline as to when the executive may endorse the plan, which would allow it then to go to cabinet for approval. The province also provided us with assurance that there was a letter being prepared in response to Northern Rockies letter, but we haven't seen that as of yet, but we are expecting it shortly. In regards to the economic impact assessment and the information that was sought from Stantec Consulting, Stantec provided 2 options, which are detailed in the report. So option number 1 is a detailed review of the socioeconomic analysis undertaken by the province that supports the BCP-RP at an estimated cost of approximately $12,604, and an estimated time to complete would be 6 to 8 weeks to have that one completed by Stantec. This would essentially provide a review of the methodology employed by the province, and take a look and review at the validity of the information used by the province to estimate the potential impacts that were identified in that plan. Option number 2 is a fulsome review of the socioeconomic analysis that was undertaken, so similar to option 1, as well as real tangible impacts to both the oil and gas and forestry sectors. And that would be at an estimated cost of $75,000 and would take approximately 6 months to complete. So at this time, further directions being sought from mayor and council regarding these options and how they might like to proceed. And some options have been provided at the end of the report.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead.
Are there any grant opportunities to fund these options, whether it's option 1 or 2?
So I have not seen any grant opportunities that would be relatable to this, although I look at Hillary as our grant person, but there's nothing that I've seen come through recently that would allow us to kind of undertake this assessment.
Councilor Solz?
Yeah, I know that we originally contacted Stantec because they had given us done some previous work on this in a previous era. And I know that based on the aim or our aim in hiring them in the first place, is the economic impact assessment. I'm beginning to think that it doesn't really matter to whoever is reading an economic impact if there's already a mind made up as to what to act, what process to move forward. So I'm not sure if this is money well spent in getting Stantec to do either one of these things. I'd like comment from some of the rest.
Councilor Going?
Yeah, I think it's imperative that we get a fulsome socioeconomic analysis of the plan. The province promised us that they would do it, and they haven't, and they're not going to do it. I just think that, I mean, I don't want to come up with $75,000 either, but I think we would be remiss in not finding out what those impacts of the plan are going to be in terms of oil and gas, our resource development and our community forest. And we're not going to get this information from the province. So if we're not going to be informed, then how do we advocate? Whether it's a positive or a negative. If we don't have the information, how do we make informed decisions to move anything forward?
Councilor Andrews?
Yeah, I agree with getting the info, but I'm struggling with, if the province isn't willing to grab the info themselves, are they going to use it if we provide it to them? Like, if we know the social economic impact of it all, that's great for us to advocate and try to push those values and information that we get. But if nobody's going to listen anyways, if the minds are already made up, do we bother doing the work? I think we should, but.
Councilor Dickey?
Very interesting discussion. I think that there's partnerships, of course, with the guide and outfitters in this area, the First Nations, the Wildlife Association, the Ministry of Wildlife, to come up with a solution. And it needs to be a partnership, and it needs to be not 75,000 spent by the municipality, but 75 in a collaborative approach to address this. As a wife of a trapper, every year the trappers would trap wolves that set at least 2 or 3 traps and trap at least 2 or 3 wolves. That's not happening anymore. So the wolves are going after the caribou and all the other chain of wildlife there. So what are we doing about the wolves? Or why not have a call, right? So I think there's solutions that could be collaborative with bringing in the right people to the table. And maybe it's just having an informal discussion with them all. Set aside a night of let's figure out what we want to do about this report.
So at our last meeting with the province, we were told that it's not socially acceptable to have a call, and it would not be happening. So I really like your idea of connecting with the guide and outfitters, the Northeast Wildlife, is it Federation they're called, the Trappers Association, and see if they have dollars that they would like to contribute. But barring that, like without the information, and to address what Councillor Andrews was saying, is like we come up against this all the time, whether it's health, whether it's Caribou, whether it's connectivity. It's like, unless we go out and get the information firsthand, the information that we're receiving is not necessarily an accurate reflection of what our reality is. Nobody is going to do that for us. Nobody is going to live it like we live it. And so if we don't have the information to advocate for ourselves or to call people on their inaccurate information, it's like your province could say, well, there isn't going to be an economic effect. And we can say, well, that's not exactly true because here we have this report that says this. So yeah, that's how I feel. I don't want to spend the money, but I think it's imperative that we get the information that we need.
Councillor Roper.
Yeah, it sounds like a big number on paper, but when you compare it to the possible economic ramifications, it's just a drop in the bucket to what could be a disastrous situation. So yeah, I mean, it's having that information is going to help us, but will it change the end result? That's a big question as well. And how do we use that information to get an ends to our means? But we won't know until we try.
So if I can, I've been around this block once already in the South Piece. And we all know how it went. And I can tell you that the provincial numbers and the process they went through to determine the social-economic impacts of Southern Mountain Caribou plan was garbage. It was garbage. It was no good. And so really having a look at their numbers, I think is an important process in and of itself. These are facts. This is information that I think we need. But I think the conversation around the table, we're targeting the wrong partner. It's not the province that will listen to us. It's our neighbors across the river. Because they are decision makers and we're not. We're considered to be stakeholders in this, where our neighbors are decision makers. And it could be that that in this collaborative approach that we're talking about, if there's some information that will allow them to modify, suggest that the province modifies the agreement, because the agreement between those two parties, then that's money well spent. And it's money it's information we can put in the hands of a local partner that we have, which is the nation across the river. So I'm a believer that this is something we should do. Coming up, the money is a different story, perhaps. I mean, it's 75,000, and I don't think we have it in this year's budget with what's left. There may be some money there with respect to starting it off in a two-phased approach, and then budgeting next year for whatever's left. I mean, it clearly is a two-phase approach that they're offering. One is for $12,000 to review the province's numbers. And then the secondary part of it is a much bigger process. So if we split this from a financial perspective, if there's agreement to ask Stantec to go ahead and do this in a two-phase approach, you can pay for the first portion of it and then put it in the budget for the next year. And then in that process, I believe if the others don't have money to assist us, we need to do it anyway. So you put the maximum amount in the budget, and then you go out and try to collaborate with others and see if there's opportunity for them to participate. So that would be my approach. So I see a few more lights. So Councillor Growing?
Yeah, I don't see it as a two-phase. I would like Stantec to be able to go forth and do a fulsome review and not be limited by, well, we can do this part in this budget and this part in the next budget. I think that there is surplus money that could be found to cover the cost for the $75,000.
I'll put that question to staff then. Is it possible to come up with $75,000, or is the expectation that we pay it all at once?
We wouldn't necessarily have to pay it all at once because you get billed for billable time. too.
Sure.
Because you're not front loading that component. And I'll let Lisa speak to the budget perspective. You gotta remember that meeting we're having on the 12th too.
Yes, don't forget about the surprise on the 12th. No, just kidding. I'm quite sure, yeah, and we wouldn't probably be even thought of invoicing her until sometime well into 2023. So I'm sure with the carryover that we have from the ECTEV, we could probably pull together the funds. I do think that, the information and you haven't seen the proposal from Stantec because there was some, proprietary information in there that we didn't want to just attach it to the report, but without swaying council's decision one way or another, that more fulsome review does provide some pretty valuable information that could be used for more than one purpose. So it's just something to consider.
And sorry, just wanted to say one more thing. The 6 month kind of worries me because I think we need this information now to be dealing with what the province has come. Well, I mean, we wrote our letter September 15th and still haven't heard back from them regarding our concerns. So I'm not exactly sure where they are, but we know they're in negotiations with parties that we are not a part of. So I am concerned with the 6 month timeline. And so the more that we delay that, then I think more detrimental it will be for us.
And just to further that, as I'm reading more and thinking about it more, having an updated social economic study on the potential PNG in the area for today's day, as opposed to when we did it last time, could be definitely beneficial. That there's things on the horizon that will be considered now that weren't even thought of when we did our last one that could be bigger impacts for sure.
So the last one that you're talking about, was that specific to the Caribou plan and the things that are happening in the Caribou plan, or was that general to the entire region?
The last one that was completed?
The last socioeconomic
Yeah,
impact
so that
study?
one was specific to the plan that was being proposed by the province, the BCRIP at the time.
Okay.
And the impacts to just forestry, I believe they opted out not to include the oil and gas in that one.
Okay, so it is relatable then, it's not that what your point.
And
Okay.
with that in mind, it was a very good report.
Exactly.
Stantec did a very, very good, thorough job, better than most other ones. I've
So we're
seen.
comfortable with the work that they provide. I'm
Because-
looking for somebody to make a resolution.
Oh, okay, so then I just didn't want to stall the conversation, but I am more than willing to make a motion that council adopt option number 2. Do you want me to read it out? Or a review of the socioeconomic analysis undertaken for the BCPRP as described in option 1, in addition to an analysis of the potential opportunity, ... That's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
Moved by Councillor Gerwin, second by Councillor Roper. Discussion or further discussion, Councillor Anderson.
Do we want to add the soliciting the help from our partners into this motion, or do you want a separate motion of that?
I think I would like a separate motion.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I would like to further a motion that we solicit the help of our across the river neighbors, FNFN, and all other appropriate parties, be the Guiding Outfitters and Stone Mountain Sheep Society, all of the above.
For what? For what?
For help with for funding input, just general help with doing the Stantec social economics analysis. Yes.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Dickey. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried as well.
And sorry, may I just add one more thing, is just that when we contact Stantec, that we kind of ask that it doesn't take 6 months, given what we know could be coming down. I mean, it's hard to tell when the province is going to do what the province is going to do, but this information would be more valuable to have earlier rather than later. So if it could be before 6 months, that would be good. And then further to Councillor Sewell's comments on the first Stantec reports, like, because we were actually doing the Caribou before this South Peak was,
That's right.
and then it stalled here. And so that might have had something to do with it. I don't know. But anyways, the more information we have, the better.
Okay. Good, thank you. They kind of get easier as we go, I hope. 6.3 Administrative Report 8522, Local Government Climate Action Program, which is kind of an extension, or I guess it's a replacement of the CARET program. There is a recommendation there. Is some staff to speak to this, please?
This is an exciting one. Again,
Only the way you can put a spin on it.
sure. So before you is a report regarding the new local government climate action program. So we felt it was important that we provide council with an update of what this new program entails and receive endorsement from council regarding Northern Rockies participation. So as Mayor, as you indicated, this program replaces the previous CARET program, and there's some background information of briefly of what that program entailed. In May of 2022, the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy launched the new LGCAP program, which provides local governments and modern treaty nations with predictable and stable funding to implement climate action projects that will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help the province achieve the targets set out in legislation. Participation in the program by signatories of the BC Climate Action Charter is voluntary, so this is not something that we have to do. However, in order to receive the funding, there are certain things that we do have to do as program participants. There's two foundational provincial plans that basically support the program. That is the Clean BC Roadmap to 2030 and the Climate Preparedness and Adaptation Strategy. The program is fairly flexible and is intended to be non-prescriptive around which sort of projects a community can undertake, provided that they are in line with the objectives of those two plans. So that's kind of one of the, I mentioned previously, one of the great things about this program is that it provides that flexibility for communities to be able to choose projects that fit their communities and yet achieve those targets that the province is attempting to achieve. So it's not a blanket approach of let's, create some legislation that one size fits all type of approach. This is something that we can actually see real meaningful projects being undertaken in our community. There's some information in the report regarding what those targets are, and then some information about what those two foundational documents include. One of the things I like to think about around this program is that why local governments? So why not local governments? We have, jurisdiction over things like buildings, water, waste, transportation, landfills. So it's a great opportunity again for us to play a role in contributing to achieving those targets. The report also outlines the eligibility and mandatory requirements of the LGCAP. So you do have to be signatory to the BC Climate Action Charter, which the Northern Rockies is. We will have to undertake mandatory emissions measurements and reporting beginning in year 2, or develop a system to be able to report beginning in year 2. We do have to demonstrate climate investment equivalent to 20% of the provincial funding received. So we did receive $71,000, and that is intended to be received over that same amount for the next 3 years. So by the end of the 3-year period, we'll have approximately over $200,000. We can put that in reserve and spend it all on one project, or we can spend it over the course of 3 years, provided it's all spent at the end of the 3-year period. The 20% is not intended to be onerous. It's not intended that if we were given $70,000, we have to spend 20%. it's an opportunity to actually demonstrate what we're doing in kind or initiatives that would contribute 20% of the cost. So staff time, work that we've undertaken around climate would count. So again, the program's not intended to be onerous in that regard. So the next steps. The next steps that I've recommended is basically I'll provide a presentation to the Environmental Advisory Committee in January regarding what the program is, in the hopes that the EAC will provide some recommendations to bring back to council regarding some projects or some ideas and how we may want to spend the 71,000 that we've been provided. And then work with Trevor, our Director of Finance, regarding the mandatory emissions tracking. So in closing, I've provided some recommendations for Mayor and Council to consider, with the recommended option being that the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality participate in the Local Government Climate Action Program, and that we are committed to completing all mandatory requirements associated with the program.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Thompson? Councillor Andrews?
Because our vermicomposting isn't accepted yet, can we file this one under that program?
So I believe to an extent our vermicomposting is accepted. There's just aspects of it that, we need to work a little bit more closely with the Ministry of Environment to ensure that there's some recognition of how we're managing it. That's the great thing about the program, is that it's so broad as far as how we might be able to apply those funds. It was even suggested that, using the funds as like a grant and allowing community organizations to make application for climate projects would even qualify. So it's very broad. Building upgrades, vermicomposting, it's endless. So these are lengthy documents that have a lot of objectives, a lot of different ways that we can apply the funding. So I think bringing it to the Environmental Advisory Committee and also getting their input would be a great way to try and figure out what we'd like to do with this.
Any other questions?
In 2023, do you think there's a way, is there a meter that we could get to measure the amount of hot air we produce in this room? Oh, never mind.
That's Trevor's job. Figure that out.
Okay.
Hot air is one thing, methane something else. All right, so
I can make a motion.
yes, please.
I make a motion that we adopt recommendation number 1.
Okay.
You need me to want me to?
Yeah, for the folks on the
Okay.
that might be a TV.
That the NRM participate in the Local Government Climate Action Program and is committed to completing all mandatory requirements associated within the program.
I'll second.
Moved by Councillor Growing, second by Councillor Andrews. Discussion. So I would like to say that there are probably some costs involved with the setup of this, the measuring and those kinds of things. We probably should look after those first. And then there's a free for all for the rest of it. So I also like the idea that this will go to the committee, the environmental committee, for their ideas. So I'm in favor. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor. Oh, go ahead.
Nope, you go ahead.
All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you for your work. 6.4 is community waste 6.4 administration report 8622, the community waste diversion. Staff, please.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you, Mayor. Hi, Mayor and Council. So Admin 86, this report presents the Northern Rockies Environmental Advisory Committee report and recommendation, which was included as attachment 1. The Environmental Advisory Committee was established in early 2022, and it met 5 times over the year. The purpose of this council committee is to investigate and provide information and guidance to council on topics associated with environmental sustainability in the Northern Rockies. The committee's initial meetings included a presentation of the NRM Solid Waste Management Plan, and we're primarily focused on waste management and sustainability. And through these meetings, discussion around successes of the plan and opportunities for improvement were highlighted, and the EAC developed the attached recommendation based on these discussions. So from the EAC committee report, the recommendation is that the NRM develop a plan to advocate for changes in access to recycling programs, to seek partnership opportunities with local companies to further waste diversion efforts, to advocate for changes to provincial recycling programs, and to implement mandatory waste diversion practices in NRM policies, facilities, and agreements. So Admin Report 86 provides some background information to the EAC report, primarily divided into two areas. The first relates to waste diversion initiatives from the Solid Waste Management Plan, which was developed in 2016. The guiding principles of this 10-year plan include promoting zero waste through diversion, education, collaboration, and policy. And some achievements from the plan, as you're probably aware of, include the development of the vermicompost, the bottle donation program, and most recently, the establishment of the Share Shed. There are some other initiatives identified in the Solid Waste Management Plan that haven't been implemented, and that includes curbside collection programs for recycling and for organics, looking at raising tipping fees and hosting a household hazardous waste roundup day. So as promotion of those current waste diversion programs occurs, there have been some challenges identified from the community with the existing voluntary drop-off individual subscription model for waste diversion, including the lack of consideration of individual barriers to participating in those services as they might relate to accessibility, transportation, and/or affordability. The second component of the admin report highlights challenges with the Organic Matter Recycling Regulation, or OMAR. OMAR is the authority on the operation of compost and compost facilities, and it's basically established on traditional composting. So while the NRM is required to consult OMAR for vermicomposting, the operational processes are significantly different, and as such, some exemptions are required for those ongoing operations. And while the existing authorization enables the NRM vermicompost project to continue, it is limiting, or it can be limiting, as it presents challenges with communicating the waste diversion opportunities available, the broad promotion of the unique cardboard waste management solution being one of them. As the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change is currently undergoing a regulatory modernization effort to better align requirements with present-day practices, there might be an opportunity for the NRM to provide comments or engage as a stakeholder. So the recommendations are there in the report.
Questions, please. Excuse me. Councilor Grow.
I don't have any questions. I just am ready to make a motion to adopt recommendation number 1. But I don't know if anybody had comments.
Are there any other questions?
I would second that motion.
What's the motion that we're moving, please?
Okay, motion that staff seek and provide regional council with information related to the effectiveness of current waste diversion efforts, and that staff investigate and provide options related to the improvement of waste diversion opportunities in the NRM, and that the NRM continue to provide comment through the Ministry of Environment and advocate for changes to organic matter recycling regulations as they pertain to vermicomposting.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Growing, second by Councilor Roper. Discussion. Is the last part of that strong enough? I mean, I heard a plea for us to, get involved as a stakeholder because this vermicomposting works so well, and there's barriers to making it happen. So is this good enough? And then just the fact that we're all behind it, that we'll move forward. I mean, I think we probably should be doing what we can to influence the, what's it called? The organic, the recycling regulation.
Well,
So that's my only, I just thought it was pretty soft if we really want to be going at this. So
I think advocate, the word that's used is advocate. And so advocate can mean many things, right?
Okay.
It can be hard advocates or soft. And I think we're ready to be a bit harder than what we have been, just because we have more information, we have more data, we have real-time figures that show the success of this project, and we want to move it forward. And if we're going to improve accessibility to the project, then we need to be able to take in that cardboard in a more voluminous manner. So yeah, I think it's strong enough because I think
Good.
I think we
Thanks.
all have a
I
good
just,
understanding.
I just wanted to have this discussion, so we impress upon staff that we really want to go for this. Councillor Sol.
I think that we have plenty of evidence that what we are doing with the vermin composting is working very, very well. In fact, and therefore we could, instead of advocate, we could demand change.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Thank you. Admin report 8722, military service recognition book. I think this one's pretty straightforward.
They stole my mic. Yes, this will be straightforward and it's pretty quick and it's not too detailed. So basically since 2012, council has approved funds to put a small ad in the military recognition book put out by the Legion. And so I recommend that we do that again this year. There's a couple of different choices and a lot of range of prices. We've always gone with the $350 business card size in color.
Question? Comments? Council's, what are council's wishes?
Let's do it.
Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion, sure.
What motion are you making? Councilor?
That we go with what we've done in the past.
Option one,
option
that a
one.
full color business card advertising in the 2023 military service recognition book be purchased by the NRM for a cost of $350.
Correct.
Moved by Councilor Roper. Second by Councilor Dickey. Discussion.
If we make that can't that just be an administrative expense that's approved annually? Like, does it need to come to the council table?
If council wishes us to do that, provide direction, like say annually do this, then we can continue to do so until otherwise told differently.
It's $350.
Exactly.
The only thing is, though, I mean, I love that idea and thank you so much for thinking about it. The only thing is that some years ago, we got to redevelop the ad because we weren't happy with the ad. So maybe it could be something like every new council or something, the ad is shown. And then we have a chance to update it. But yeah, I like that idea.
Amendment is in order to make this an annual authorization. Moved by Councilor Dickey, second by Councilor Andrews.
For the amendment,
For
right?
the amendment? Yeah. I just asked our corporate manager if that amendment is in order. It fits it all, right? Yeah. Okay. It is in order. Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That's carried. Discussion on the main motion as amended? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 6.6 Administration Report 8822, 2023 first quarter grant and aid requests.
So this, you have before you 8 applications for the Q1 2023 grant and aid program. This is written a little differently than we normally do, just because we anticipate some amendments coming to you at the December meeting.
Spoiler alert. No, we're going quick. No, we're going to change the procedure so this happens. Go ahead.
For the grant and aid policy, as well as the rental exemption policy. So the timing isn't great, admittedly, on this, because our intake period for 2023 grant and aid program will fall in line with this amended policy, but applicants are kind of being evaluated under the current provisions of the policy. So essentially, we have 7 applicants who are requesting the $1,000 grant in cash, and one that's requesting an exemption of a rental fee. We do have funds remaining in the 2022 budget, so it all depends on their timing for redemption. So there's a number of them whose events will occur prior to our budget approval period. But in years past, we have worked with a pre-approved budget for the following year for this program, just to provide some certainty for those groups around their funding and their events and so on. So there's a few ways that you can slice this. So there's a variety of options there, as you can see. In past years, as I said, we've pre-approved the coming year's budget. And if you wanted to apply the policy as it currently is, you could approve the 7 applications for monetary assistance and kind of a proven principle that rental exemption application once that policy has been amended and approved.
Thank you. I read through this and I read through some of the previous minutes about this and saw that there was a significant amount of discussion around pre-approving budget amounts for the following year. I tend to agree with that. That perspective. And I don't just wonder if I might be able to ask if there's another way that we could do this. I noticed from looking at the timing of these that 4 of them need to be done before the budget. They amount to $4,000. There's $7,500 left in this year's grant and aid. There's ish. We can approve those and cut a check to them in this year for next year. And put the other 3 off because they're later in the year as part of the budget discussions, and just carry that forward, and then we don't have to pre-approve the budget, and the people that need the money in advance of budget time will get it. So, and that's not what mentioned in one of the options. So I throw it out. A, is it legal? B, is it practical?
I second your recommendation if you made a recommendation.
No, I haven't yet. And I'm asking staff because it's not part of this. So is it not an option that you've considered for a reason?
No, no, and we have done that in past years where we've basically utilized, if a group is willing to redeem their funds prior to the next year, we've done that if there's surplus funds at the end of the year in the existing budget. The only place that gets a little dicey is because we are granting, if we're clear that we're granting funds for next year's program just within this year. So in the current policy, in the current grant and aid policy, a group may only apply once annually and receive funds once annually. So essentially, if they're a group that's taken advantage of the grant and aid already in 2022, but if we're being mindful and clear about the fact that we're dispersing the funds in 2022, but it is their 2023 allocation, so they don't get the impression that they can apply again in 2023.
Okay, and then the last issue that I have with that, in the event that their event does not go off, you've prepaid them, you've given them, they give it back, and you just make that part of the agreement that you're talking about. Okay, Councillor Roper.
I think for myself personally, there's not many scenarios where I wouldn't be approving these requests. It's for the community. It's not a big ask, and it just provides that level of certainty. If it was a bigger number, I would be willing to stretch out that timeline and carefully consider it. But for me, there's just not a whole lot of scenarios where I'm not going to vote yes for the community because it's coming from the community. So that's my personal thing.
Thank you. Yeah. Did I miss you, Councillor Dickey? Did I see your hand? No? Okay, Councillor Crowley.
So my one concern with it is that these groups are all applying now because they need to know. So the ones that, if they're further out, but if they're not going to get it, then they might need to reorganize finances or do a different fundraiser. I'm thinking in terms of the hospice one, it's not until further on, but they need to know now. So I'm just wondering, I thought that, because I'm very much one of those people that don't like to do the pre-approvals, but I'm wondering if in this budget season, we could do the grant and aid for 2023 and first quarter of 2024. So next year, it won't be a pre-approval, right? It could be the amount, the $20,000 or whatever that we're going to do for 2023, and then what amount we're going to give for the first quarter of 2024.
Is there an impact on the fiscal year end? I mean, it's right here. You've got to pay it out in this year, right? If you're going to use funds from this year or that year, you can't do that next quarter. Would you like to sit up to the table, please?
I would just say that essentially it's covered already, because when it comes to it, we do a 5-year financial plan. So we take those expected or budgeted grant and aid amounts and we carry it forward.
Oh.
I was,
Well, it's the pre-approval bit. Why is the pre-approval in there if it's not necessary then? Just because we've did it before?
Well, but the 5-year plan is not necessary, like, sorry, my understanding is like when we are approving the grant and aid budget for 2023, we're doing that at our budgetary meetings. And then what the finance department is doing in terms of 5 years, we don't vote on that 5-year budget, right?
Yeah, we do.
But it's a projection. It's not like an actuality. Like if we, in 2023, we vote on this budget and then, okay, you do the 5-year plan. But in 2024, if something's happened and we need to readjust, we still have that opportunity to readjust. So that's what it is about the pre-approvals, right? So I think that it's good to be working within the budget year of 2023. And I don't like the pre-approvals because there got to be so many of them, right? But this way, if we approve the first quarter of 2024, then yeah. I
Well,
thought
that helps
was
the
a solution.
future. How does that help with this? Because you're talking about a policy change there,
Well, you, okay.
right? Right?
Yeah.
So how does that help with folks, this particular?
It doesn't.
Okay.
But I thought you asked for suggestions about the.
Sure, about,
So
yeah.
that's why. So it's talking about two separate issues. So
Yeah.
if you want
So
my
there's-
input on what we should do now, is I'm for option number 1.
I'm not sure who was up first. Council Andrew hasn't had a chance yet.
so I'm kind of the same piece of mind as Councillor Roper. Like for me, the grant and aids, they're a $20,000 budget that I don't see myself voting against for the next term. So to pre-approve based on this grant and aid, I'm okay with those pre-approvals. I understand where it gets dicey with pre-approvals, but because our fiscal year end doesn't run with the annual year of December, January, we have a lot of non-for-profit organizations. We have a lot of other places where our budget times, they don't line up. So pre-approvals will need to happen for the security of some of these organizations. So I do see that there are necessary times for pre-approvals, and I would like to see us pre-approve this one.
What are your wishes?
I would like to make the motion that the 2023 grant and aid budget be pre-approved, 20,000, and that 7 applications for monetary assistance for the 2023 first quarter grant and aid program be approved, and that the application from the Fort Nelson Hospice Society be approved in principle to be associated with the rental exemption policy once approved.
Moved by Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Roper. Further discussion? I am going to vote against this because of the pre-approval motion, but I'm with you guys that I would not vote against the individual requests because they're all important. But for me, unless it's critical to the nature of business that we need to do, I'm just not in favor of pre-approvals. What if we wanted to take it up? I guess we could still take it up. But what if we want to do 50,000 a year instead of 20,000 a year? But anyways, that's just my perspective. Are there any other comments?
Just one more comment is that I do feel that these are critical to the community as a whole. So that's where I stand. So I'm more than happy to support it now. And I honestly don't like there's a culture of not doing pre-approvals. And that was something that I walked into when I was first elected. And I still don't fully understand the dilemma with some pre-approvals in certain circumstances. So I'm more than happy to go ahead with this.
Yeah, that's a discussion we can have another time. But your whole budget process is a whole budget process. We're skipping that whole process to do a pre-approval. That's in a nutshell, is it? Okay. Anybody else? Seeing that, all in favor? Okay, opposed? I'm opposed. I'd like you to capture that, please. All right. Good. Administrative report 8922, appointment of directors to the Regional Hospital District Board.
So no, you probably won't all recall because we were going to have the October 24th meeting. Sorry about that. So on October 24th, we presented council with a report that summarized a bit of a realization that the way we had been administering the hospital district in a variety of ways, from carrying out the meetings to administering the budget, was inconsistent with the Hospital District Act. And as a result, council resolved to basically separate those functions and begin meeting as a regional hospital district board separately starting in January. So one of the first orders of business is to appoint directors to the hospital district board. And so the report summarizes what that could look like. So a regional hospital district board may be appointed from the members of council or in its entirety, or a selection of directors of those serving on council. So additionally, within the Hospital District Act, it provides for the inclusion of members from member treaty First Nations within the hospital district's geographic area. So we confirmed in the letters patent, unlike our letters patent for the municipality, that the hospital district's geographic area includes reserve lands. Essentially, directors may be appointed to the board. They must be appointed to the board annually before February 1st. So even though council resolved to meet first and foremost as the board January 9th, you do have some time to determine when you might like to complete that set of members. Our discussion in October also talked about procedure bylaw amendments because currently our procedure bylaw includes the administration of the hospital district board. And although there was some confusion with the resolution, the discussion reflected that internally we had determined it would be better to have two separate procedure bylaws to really reflect that spirit of separation. So have our NRM procedure bylaw reflect the procedures of council at this table, and have a procedure bylaw for the regional hospital district, although somewhat simplified, be similar, but reflect the procedures for that board. So the intention is to bring back both of those procedure bylaws at a future date. For the hospital district, it would be January 9th. And for NRM, it will be at a time to be determined because we have other discussions on that one as well. So let's make that amendment count. And that's all I have. So it's entirely up to council in terms of your appointment of directors to the Regional Hospital District Board, and we wait your direction.
Other questions for the corporate manager? So I have a couple, if Yes. Is there a minimum or maximum number of directors required for the hospital board?
Not that is obvious in the Hospital District Act. And looking at some of the regional district compositions, there is no maximum.
Is is the membership, where's that established? Is it established as a term in a terms of reference document or in the procedures bylaw for the new hospital district? Is it like what document, I guess, identifies the makeup of the director?
So this council's resolution forms the directors, appoints the directors, and then the procedure bylaw summarizes the membership. So
Okay.
not the people, but the entities that comprise it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, so then we have the ability to assign ourselves and extend an invitation to other entities? Okay. Councilor Gurley.
Okay, explain to me then, or help me to process. The hospital board would set the budget, they would approve the budget, and that budget is what gets taxed. So are there any legal whatever for people on the hospital board setting the rate of taxation that aren't elected officials? Did that make sense?
Yep. So the hospital district board has the power to enact bylaws, because that's how you form that budget, is through the establishment of a budget bylaw. And I think what will be the most significant change is that the scope of that board is to only look at hospital improvements, equipment, and capital improvements. So really what drives that budget is going to be what that district holds in reserve and what capital requests are forthcoming from the health authority. So it's a much smaller scope than what we've traditionally seen in that budget, obviously, which is what we discussed at the October meeting, is that a lot of the ancillary activities will be dealt with on the municipal budget side as opposed to on the hospital district budget side.
And you made comment that the hospital act
Yes,
provides the ability for First Nations communities to be included.
correct. Member
So it's a
treaty nations.
specific allowance in the act itself to make that happen.
Mhm.
I saw a hand over here. I'm sorry, Councilor Rupert.
So when they set their budget, it still has to be approved by council. Is that correct?
No.
No, we don't get a yay or an A.
Well,
Okay.
so so municipal council, no, but the composition of the hospital district board, if council so chooses,
the
will be you. Plus
But is the
potentially
council,
other members.
plus if we choose to extend an invitation, that's correct.
Correct.
I think we should extend an invitation. I think it shows opportunity that we're prepared, that we trust the community, because their members and the residents use this hospital and use the services of the hospital. And if we're going to look forward to true reconciliation, having everybody involved in those decisions is important, in my view. Councilor Andrews.
I agree that we should extend the invitation out to any Treaty 8 neighboring communities. Would Up Highway residents qualify as well? And could we send it up for Toad River, Muncho Lake? If they're would they not be eligible to be on the board? That would be our representation there.
You're the
Yeah.
elected officials.
Just making sure.
Councilor Dickey.
One of the recommendations I'd have is in speaking with some of the nurses from the hospital and hearing they're not happy. And I think one of the discussions is that they don't have a voice at the table of any decision-making tables, and they work there. So the decisions that we make for the hospital affect them, but they have no voice. So I think the composition of the board should always have a nurse rep or a rep from the hospital sitting on there as an employee, maybe as an advisor, and to verify some information. We don't know what happens there, right? But I also do like the idea of having a First Nations board member there, because they also have, in that partnership, they also have access to funding. If there's equipment purchases or services or things like that.
Yeah, and there's, although there's no ability to tax directly, there is the ability for a voluntary, participation in the funding. With respect to the nurses and I thought I heard pretty clear from the corporate manager that they need to be an elected official of the municipality or a member from the council of a First Nations community. Yeah, so that would, then the nurse, if we ever get to a point where the community health boards are, that's where we would want to see that sort of thing. Even if we're establishing something of our own, an advocacy group or something like that.
Well, it says that they can't be a decision maker. Is there any opposition written in that we could have an advisory role for maybe a nurse liaison role, kind of like how council has a liaison role at our local non-for-profits? Would there be something against us doing that? Because I like the idea of having that firsthand knowledge for sure.
Yeah, I guess that would be up to the hospital board and the deliberations that they'd be asking for expertise from across the breadth of when it comes to capital works, right? So, and sometimes can be pretty significant capital works in a hospital, right? Significant. So, I would like to see a motion that appoints this council as the hospital board and extend an invitation to both the Fort Nelson and Prophet River First Nations to appoint a representative if they choose.
Sorry, does this have to be done January the 9th or can we do it tonight?
No, you can do it tonight. I think the important part is that the intention is captured so that when you gather on January 9th, you have the semblance of a board, and then as like other members can be determined up until February, what did I say, 1st?
Then you made that motion?
I was asking. If
Oh,
you would like-
I'll make that motion. Sure.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Gerwing. Second by Councillor Roper, that we appoint this board as the directors, and that we extend an invitation for the First Nations community of Prophet River and Fort Nelson to, if they choose, to appoint a director as well. That's moved and seconded. Discussion? Councillor Andrews.
Are we looking for one appointed director from the neighboring nations or more?
I think one for now. We'll let the board determine that based on the deliberations, because they get an opportunity to change the procedure bylaws as they see, right? All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. That one could have went longer. That brings us to correspondence, I think. Yeah, that brings us to correspondence. 7.1, there is a letter from Mr. Bartlett. How would you like to deal with this? Receive for information or receive for discussion? There was a whole series of emails that went back and forth. So I'd suggest that this is for discussion. Move it, Councilor Roper.
Yeah, is there anything that we can do? The light is coming from the school.
Can we put it on the floor first, please, is for discussion or information? Oh, okay.
Yeah, what do you mean?
I'm sorry. So from a correspondence perspective, each of these needs to be put on the floor for discussion, right? So, or you just receive it for information and you don't deal with it. You just receive the correspondence, or you just, and you move on, or you receive it for discussion where you actually will discuss the component of the correspondence.
So we need a motion to put it onto the floor.
That's right.
So I would make that motion to put it on the floor.
Right, that we receive it for
For
discussion.
discussion.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Roper, second by Councillor Andrews. It's on the floor for discussion.
Great.
Go
So what can we do? What can we do?
Let's ask staff.
From a bylaw enforcement perspective, not a whole lot, because it's no bylaw specific to be able to deal with that. So it's, the only thing we currently can do is have discussions, which we have had with School District 81. Just around trying to be part of a potential solution or to suggest some solutions, but in terms of enforcement piece, there's nothing that we can do in the absence of a bylaw.
Councillor Andrews?
I did end up with another email with CC'd on it, and this one is from Margaret Ann Hall informing Mr. Bartlett that they are still looking into it and looking at solutions. I'm not sure there's anything for this specific issue that council needs to look at, maybe possibly future ones. I think the underlying issue that comes into here is the possibility of light pollution. And if council wants that on a bylaw, we want to have anything implemented, I think would be the way to kind of look at what Jim was requesting from us, Mr. Bartlett here.
Has staff done anything with respect to this complaint so far?
Or just a, yes, sir, just a quick update. So I did have conversations with Mark Keeble with School District 81, and then also with one of their maintenance people, discussing what some options may or may not be. They've indicated the same, that they're aware of the situation. They've made 3 or 4 adjustments to the light, that particular light to try to reduce, I guess, what we would call, when I research and look at bylaws that are out there, it's actually light, it's light trespass. So light pollution is more for astronomers and airplanes and whatnot like that. So potato, I guess, at the end of the day. That said, I had nothing better to do Friday night, so I went and took a look myself. Plenty of old public works. There's some info that we'd like to go take a look at, like that road in behind, or that leads into GW Carlson. I'm not quite sure. I think that might be School District 81, but I haven't confirmed. So there's some stuff that we'd like to take a look at as part of the discussions regarding that. And also, because from a lighting and a safety perspective, there's honestly, if we were doing it, we'd probably do some things differently. From a street light perspective, we're aware School District 81, has limited funds in terms of what they can or cannot do, but we're discussing possibly some potential options. It said I'd follow up with them after the discussion that council had tonight, and we take it from there. But that's.
So can we leave this in staff's capable hands to come up with an amiable solution? Oh, good. Good. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. There is a letter there from Nathan Cullen, the Minister of Municipal Affairs. We can receive for information. Moved by Councillor Gerwing, second by Councillor Dickey, that we receive that letter for information. There's a letter from Michael McKnight, the President and CEO of United Way, who's interested in coming and speaking to us. So there's a request, action request here.
So you want a motion to?
Move to discuss, or you can move.
Discuss. No, I want to discuss.
Okay,
please.
moved by Councillor Gerwing that we have a discussion. Second by Councillor Roper. It's open for discussion. Councillor Gerwing.
Yeah, I would be very interested. They say that they're going to contact us about requesting a presentation time. I would very much like to respond back, thanking him and inviting him to present. I'm most interested in why the United Way of the Lower Mainland has requested this, and if the United Way of Northern BC knows about this, because it's like, it's turf war, I don't know. Anyways, I think it would be well worth investigating that. Yeah, interesting, yeah.
So a motion to send a letter to them, moved by Councillor Gerwing, second by Councillor Andrews, that we respond to the United Way, asking them to attend, hopefully not the December 12th meeting. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The-
No, that was for information.
That was just for information. We moved that for information. The letter from Katrine Conroy, the Ministry of Forests.
Just received for information.
Yeah, moved by Councillor Roper, second by Councillor Growing, that we receive it for information. A letter from Dan Davies. There was no particular request. This is just really coming to us for.
I'll move that for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Roper, second by Councillor Growing for information. Letter from the mayors and Reeves from Northwestern Alberta requesting a meeting. Move, Councillor Andrews.
I'd like to move for discussion, please.
Moved by discussion, second by Councillor Going. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Session's open.
I'm just curious, Mayor, in your experience, have you dealt with this group before?
I have not dealt with this group before.
Okay. I would be interested in hosting a meeting. What would the rest of council think?
Great. Oh, did I see hands flashing around? Yeah, Councillor Souls, please.
I'm interested in meeting with them, and yes, we have had discussions in the past. Some of us have been following the Northern Alberta world for a while. One of the things that Northern Alberta doesn't have is a effective railway, north-south railway. And so they actually, in the era gone by, when we had an effective north-south railway, were quite interested in connecting this way because the agricultural grain hauling system that is in there, and it's a fairly large scale, they would have directed it this way had they been able to put it on their rail cars at the time. So, of course, there were other negative things that came with the potential of having a road, and we noticed it in the winter road scenario that did take place when it was opened on the years where we had a lot of oil patch activity. We had whole Alberta operations that were doing business in BC without ever crossing the scales or anyone knowing that they were there. A lot of business disappeared that could have been done out of this area that was done clandestine from the other side. So I see benefits, but benefits and liabilities, but I also think it's very worthwhile talking to other northern communities whenever you can, figure out what synergies we do have.
Councillor Going, please.
I agree. I would very much like to meet with them, but in preparation for that meeting, I would like some background information prepared, like some historical information, I would like to go in being informed as to, the history, some of the information that Councillor Souls has just presented. I don't know what else information that I would want because I don't really know what they're after. And I don't know what I don't know, but I wouldn't want to just go into the meeting cold. So, I can do my own research, but, I don't know. I think it would be worth having something prepared.
Is there any other discussion? In these times, I'm a little bit isolationist in my views at this. I agree. I was working out there when we had both the power line road open as well as a line across it, road across at Helmet, and I saw how much work came in here. And I'm always in agreement that a discussion is an appropriate way to deal with this. So that's right. We're always that much better. So I think just a recommendation to respond saying that we're prepared to have a meeting. Moved by Councillor Growing, second by Councillor Souls, that we respond to this group and that we're willing to have a meeting.
And that some background information be prepared.
Yeah. Okay. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. There's a letter there from Northern Health. Congratulations, and asking us for a meeting, which I think is kind of scheduled for December 14th. So 12th, I'm sorry. It's the 14th. All right. Information we find seems how we're moving along there.
Motion for information.
Yeah. Wow.
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Andrews and second by Councillor Roper, the receiver for information. All in favor, opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 7.8 is letter from Minister Kalon, Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation.
I'd like to recommend we open it for discussion.
Move for discussion. Moved and seconded. Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Andrews. It's open for discussion. Councillor Souls.
So just take note that for those of you who were a part of, or Kyle, I guess you're the one, who were part of the UBCM visit that we had at these ministers. This is an interesting letter because it actually holds open. It's like you can see that someone's holding a door open with their foot just a little bit so that you can see that there's potential for a door to open. That was an absolute hard no when we were sitting across the table from them. So subsequent, just in a nutshell, as council, we and staff, we went from each of the ministries that we met with. We discussed the same issue that we're having with the province needing to step up to the plate to help fund the repairs of their own rail line. And that message obviously was discussed at length behind the scenes after the fact, even though we got a hard no. So I just take this, make sure that this letter gets into the record so that our future strategic plans working for economic development on the forest side, this is part of it. They left the door open for us.
Go ahead, Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, and I also I like to highlight the one line here that I understand how important the rail link is to your communities. They heard that it's not just a community up here, there's multiple, and how important it is to all of us. That's a really good thing. I think they heard.
Councillor Going.
So the last paragraph where they announced that Tamara Danshin will be available to meet with you, perhaps, staff needs to meet with him or her.
Tammy Danshin.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I mean, let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, okay.
Why not? It says
for
right
sure.
there.
Yeah, for
Sticking
sure.
at the word.
Yeah, I know Tammy. I've met with her multiple times over, she works out of Fort St. John, out of the office in Fort St. John. I would also like to back up those statements that you've just made. I had a short meeting with, on the phone, introductory meeting with the minister. And really, it was just that. Hi, nice to meet you. But it would be nice to be able to get together face to face. It would be, yeah, maybe we can come to Victoria and have a discussion. And so that door is open there a little bit. So Mr. Barry was with me on that call, and it was, we wondered because they requested it, right? They requested that we meet. And so we weren't sure exactly why, but I think it was to keep that door open a little bit. So I agree that we should follow up, because it's not just the big issues that this group deals with. There's lots of economic opportunities that this ministry deals with, and Tammy's an excellent contact to deal with. I don't know if she'll deal with the rail stuff, but she'll certainly deal with a lot of the other stuff that we're interested in, and we may be interested in doing. Good, thank you. A letter from Sunny Dollywell, this is Deputy Minister. Grant in lieu of taxes. We're just receiving a grant. Please move by Councillor Goering, second by Councillor Andrews, that we receive that for information. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Letter from Sue Kenny with respect. Letter of support for the training program for paramedics.
Move to discuss.
Moved by Councillor Goering, second by Councillor Andrews for discussion. All in favor? Opposed? It's open for discussion.
Yeah, so I have many questions about this letter, and I mean, I'm looking at the time,
Yeah.
so I'm just wondering if we want to have staff investigate this opportunity. Some of the questions I have are, is this a for-profit institution? Are there any students from Northern Rockies Regional Municipality that are participating? And then also, I thought we could check with BC Emergency Health Services because I know that, I believe that they are now funding students to get this training. So before we would commit to any funds, I think I need more information. I don't want to just ignore it. But yeah, I think we need more information. So I would make that motion if there isn't any further discussion to.
So I might be able to help you with some of that information. And I'm surprised you're unaware of it because the coalition dealt with this last year as well as this year already. And so they're not asking for funds. They're asking,
Yeah, the ones.
then I'm sorry, letter of support, not funds. So yeah, no, it's a letter of support. Essentially what they're looking for is support for this program to make it happen in Dawson Creek. We dealt with it last year wondering, well, how many of the cohorts will actually end up working in the north? And they said, well, we don't know what that'll look like, but we sure would like to see this move forward and start training paramedics, because if you train them in the north, they're likely going to stay in the north. So then when the second letter came, we asked for some statistics. All right, what happened with the first cohort? I think they got 16, 14 ended up going through the program. We wanted to know how many of them stayed. If you want our support, we have to know that some are staying in the region, or we'd like to make sure that some are staying in the region. And they were short on detail. All of them, 14 of the 16 were in the Lower Mainland doing their practical work right now, but it was too early to tell how many of them would like to come back to the north. And so, we could give them a letter of support for the next cohort. And then when it comes time for the third letter, because by then we'll know what happened to the first cohort. So it's a little too early to tell about whether or not the cohort actually located in the north or not, because they can go anywhere in this day of paramedics, right? But they are training them at the campus at Dawson Creek, and that is some benefit, I guess, to the region. So that's a little bit more information, Councillor Green. Councillor Roper?
Yeah, I think it's close proximity to Fort Nelson will open up opportunities for our young people. So it may not lead to the result we want, but it's a step in the right direction. I would have no problem writing a letter of support.
Okay.
If we provide a letter of support, we're starting a stream of communication that might contain more information.
That's right. Moved by Councillor Roper, second by Councillor Souls. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. A letter from Terry Lee Roche. Information, I think. Moved by Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Gerwing for information. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. A letter from Daniel Smith, Executive Director, Ministry of Children's Family Development.
A motion to discuss, please.
Moved by Councillor Gerwing, second by Councillor Andrews that we discuss this. Go ahead.
And all I'm requesting that Fort Nelson Family Development get a copy of this letter.
Okay.
Seconded.
Direction. Okay. Moved and seconded that we said that we copy this to, I'm sorry, the name of the
Fort Nelson
Family. Thank you. Fort Nelson Family Development. Discussion?
I can share it with them. It's all part of my new portfolio. If you guys would like, I can make sure that they do it and save staff the time.
Okay. Good. Then we don't need to vote on that. Duly. Okay. Letter from the NRM letter to Lawrence Forsberg Service to the Community for the Forest Partnership for Community Forest Partnership Corporation. Letter's been sent already.
Motion to accept.
Thank you very much.
Seconded.
Move for information, moved by Councillor Stoll, second by Councillor Gerwing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There is a method to my madness here, but 714 letter from the Fort Nelson Ministerial Association for the food hammer donation.
Motion to discuss.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Second, Councillor Dickey. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Have we donated to them in the past? I don't recall.
No, so not directly, and I took a look back and it doesn't appear that they've applied for grant needs through the traditional stream either, so. And I honestly haven't seen outreaches like this from them before either.
Can I just share that, so we've been talking to some of the services that provide food, like the food bank and all those types of things. And one of the reports we had was that there was usually about 20 families that were using the food bank on a regular basis. They had 100 families using it last month. So what the nation's doing is we're having the food, people drop off food in the food boxes in all of our buildings. And then at our Christmas party, we're having a donation box. Plus we're donating all the money that we receive for the Safe Ride Home. So doing what we can to support them because there's a lot of families that need support right now. So I'd have no problems recommending we donate something.
Can we just get them through the grant and aid? And so then everybody is going through the same process. Like, I think they meet all the criteria, right?
So would you like me to recommend that they apply through the program? Because then my only concern is your next meeting is December 12th. And they need donations by then.
Pre-approval.
I love that idea.
It's the request for funding.
Yes,
It doesn't fit the normal application process. But we could approve it for $1,000 because they haven't said what. $1,000 is our max. You could approve it for $1,000 with a letter that says, please apply, this is the process. In the future, please apply, this is the process. Okay. You want to move it? I'm just not
That's
one of
actually-
those mayors that likes to make motions.
That was a good way. Okay.
Yeah.
What Mayor Fraser said, I recommend that.
Moved by Councillor Souls that we donate $1,000 to the food hamper fund with a letter that explains the grant and aid policy. Seconded by Councillor Roper. Further discussion? Seeing none? Oh, go ahead.
Just one point is that if anyone out there is considering donating to the food bank, cash is always a better donation because it allows them to procure the items that they need. And oftentimes we used to do a food fundraiser at the theater, half the food was expired. So cash is a very good option. So yeah, if anyone's considering a cash donation would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. If we change the procedure bylaw with respect to correspondence, we have the ability to group these into correspondence that we need to respond to, correspondence that we don't need to respond to, and then you deal with the ones you need to respond to individually and you do the rest en bloc, en masse, unless there's somebody who would like to bring one out of that. That decision is made by staff because you always have the ability to pull it out of the block if you want to discuss one of the ones that staff has put in the accepted.
I'm kind of guessing that's already in our procedure bylaw because that's how we've done it for a very long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I think we could do that now, but I don't know.
Okay. I don't think it's there. But
Okay. Okay.
you may have done it that way, but I don't think it's actually written in your procedure bylaw that way.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. Okay, the information packages can be adopted all at once.
I recommend that they be adopted all at once.
Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Andrews, that we receive the information packages from November 2nd to November 23rd in a block. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. New business. 9.1 is a consideration of memorial naming for a Mayor Streeper. So it's got my name beside it. I've received a half a dozen requests that we do something. We have the ability to move this into closed discussion because it is one of those items that fits the requirement. If that's the way you guys would like to deal with this, or we can deal with it at another time. If, you know, I think I'd like to see staff come back with a report with respect to what it looks like. I know there has been discussion with respect to the naming policy that, from what the information I can read, never really went very far with respect to actually pulling back a policy or a procedure. There was some requests for information and some follow-up requests for information, but I never did see a policy on it. So this would have to be dealt with outside of a policy, in the absence of policy. So we can talk about it in camera or out. We can ask the staff to come back with a report, because I'm sure there will be some costs involved with respect to naming a facility or something for Mayor Streeper. I just wanted to introduce that topic to you. Councillor Roper.
Just my thoughts is that I would like to keep as much as possible out of the in-camera if we can. If it's something that's absolutely necessary, I agree, we'll go in camera. But if we don't have to, we shouldn't. And yeah, I would like to discuss this another time, perhaps have staff bring something back. We're getting a little bit late.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to give it a good discussion.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm more than open to discussing it. Doesn't have to be in camera from my perspective. I am hesitant to ask staff to bring back something when they have nothing to go on. So maybe we need to have a discussion first at another time. And then if in fact it needs to go to staff for costing or whatever at that point in time, but that's what I would like to see.
Okay. There, one of the reports that came back that I read with respect to the naming policy that you guys went through in the last year, there was 4 or 5 items there that staff had brought together, but best practices. And what one of them is that the person should have been deceased for several years, and I couldn't figure out why that was important. But I came to the fact that, and also why it might want it is that the family is not grieving anymore. To have a fulsome out and out discussion right soon after might be insensitive with respect to the families grieving, and so there is some community willingness to move this along, and I just thought that that's the only reason I can think to go in camera. Does it? So let's ask staff to bring back some basic thoughts. This would be a perfect topic for a committee, the whole meeting, if we had that kind of thing. But let's wait till we get there. But
A committee of the whole meeting, but in camera.
that's
And
right. Committee of the whole meetings can be done.
The
in
only
camera.
difference between what we're doing now and a committee of the whole is a committee of the whole wouldn't lead to a decision. But this meeting could lead to a decision. Am I understanding that correctly then?
It may or may not lead to a decision. It depends on the discussion, but it could focus staff's attention with respect to what information they need to bring back to us. Just, right? Okay, so this is just direction to the staff to bring back a report at a later date. Okay. Recreation statistics for October. Normally you just receive these for information, I think. Okay. I have no additions. Are there any additions by councillors to the CAO? No. Go ahead.
I had one addition. The community of Prince Rupert suffered a tragic event a week ago today. And I was wondering if council would have an appetite to send a letter of condolence to the city. I know a lot of people are impacted and are hurting right now. And I know a lot of people on staff are hurting as well in Prince Rupert. And I'm just wondering if council would be receptive to that.
Thoughts?
My thoughts, given that John had took up residence in Prince Rupert for a while and became part of the working of that community, I think that it would be a good way of having a whole community like ours support theirs with moral support. I think that's a good idea, John.
I'd be happy to sign a letter. So moved by Councillor Roper, second by Councillor Souls, that we send a letter of condolence to the municipality. Discussion, Councillor Andrews.
Is there a personal touch you'd like to add to that, Councillor Roper, or would you like to leave that with staff?
No, I think we'll just leave it with staff and leave it as a general letter, but I do know that I think it'll be appreciated.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Council reports. Are there any council reports? Councillor Andrews.
Just one. I attended on the 20th. I attended Fort Nelson Family Development Society's annual general meeting. Got a bunch of information, did a nice meet and greet with them, and I'm looking forward to working with them over the next term.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gurmey.
Yeah, just briefly. November 2nd, I met with Noel Strauss, I saw that, who's the acting unit chief of BC Emergency Health Services, and the new Northeast District Manager, Jonathan, I can't say his last name, but his first name's Jonathan, discussed the medical situation that we presented at the October 24th council meeting. That's why he wanted to meet with me. I gave each one of you the card that kind of highlights the process of what happens when you call 911. So BC Emergency Health Services is internally auditing the ambulance call of October 10th and will provide mayor and council with information if appropriate. So he can't confirm that we will get a report, but if there is information to share, he will. And so just of note that BC Emergency Health Services secondary triage protocol is new in 2022. And this is where our residents was referred to. I'm unclear as to why our resident was referred to this secondary triage stage and not directly to the ambulance stream. And hopefully that will come out in the audit. And yeah, so I gave you the card. In late October, I attended a Rural Health Link sectors meeting at which Pacific Blue Cross made a presentation. At the end of the presentation, they asked us if we thought there were any pieces missing in their suite that they offered. And I mentioned my work around trying to get a medical travel benefit policy for a community as a whole. You know how some companies are, right? And so she was kind of like taken aback by that. She said, like, she is kind of the person that is in charge of investigating new opportunities, right? And so her name is Chanel Ewell. She's the senior manager of product portfolio and implementation. She contacted me after the meeting and informed me that her team was looking into how their medical travel benefit could maybe be adapted to support communities such as ours. So she will keep me posted. And then from that meeting, there was another not-for-profit on the island who deals with health. And she contacted me too, and we had a meeting because they were very interested in investigating that opportunity too. So I'll keep you informed of that. And since being assigned the seniors portfolio, I have connected with all the organizations in town that provide services and programs to seniors. And as a generalized statement, they are all struggling to find the necessary resources, and watch for more to come on that in the future. And I have connected with the NCLGA board chair, and the next board meeting is via Zoom, December 10th, to which I will attend. That's it.
Thank you. Any others? Then I will quickly talk about my last 3 weeks, I suppose, very quickly. Remembrance Day celebration, I spoke at that. I had a policy luncheon meeting with the Chamber of Commerce where they were talking about their own internal membership and director policies. I also went to a luncheon with the membership, which was another meeting where I had a discussion about our portfolios and the potential for committee of the whole discussions. And keeping, there were a lot of questions about that with respect to openness and keeping those open where possible. I attended yesterday the annual general meeting for the Museum and Historical Society, where Aaron Henry spoke about the construction project over, it sounds like they did a pretty good job there, and the substantial completion date is early December 7th, I think they said. Yeah, I mean, that's $1 million or more of municipal money. So it was interesting to hear that discussion. And the museum board seems to be doing fairly well. They're not flush with cash, but they're doing okay. So they reappointed their staff as well as their board of directors. So that was good. Coming up December 5th, I have a meeting with the Resource Municipalities Coalition with Northern Health in Prince George to talk about that's with the Board of Northern Health, to talk about the operational review that we've been pressing them to do. And then there's a meeting with MLA Davies on December the 14th. And you're certainly all welcome to attend. And then he's having an open house after that. That's at 1 o'clock, that meeting. Questions for me? No? Thank you. 11, agenda item 11, public news media question answer period. Guess there is now none. And I think the last order of business, we lasted longer. Yeah, we have. Hey, I'm working it. I appreciate your patience. There's a resolution to move into closed meeting. Moved by Councillor Gerwing, second by Councillor Andrews, that we go into closed meeting for section 91B, the community charter. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll rise with a report from the in-camera meeting, please.
So moved by Councillor Gerwing that Asley Pinto's application to the Recruitment, Retention, Education and Training Incentive Program be approved in principle as a newly recruited health professional with a one-time payment, and that the other portions of a newly recruited health professional be limited, subject to confirmation of eligibility. Seconded by Councillor Souls, carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. And the regular regional council meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your time.